Welcome to Chapter 7, Code in Action. This is probably the most important architectural component of building an IDP. This is about that self-service onboarding. So we'll start by doing a pip install of Flask and Kubernetes, just making sure that everything is good to go. So this is already satisfied. So in your case, that should be true because you did this, I believe, in Chapter 3 or 4. All right, so then we will look at the next steps. The first thing to do is to load the secrets from Bitwarden. This is something that you set it up in Chapter 1 and you've been repeatedly using it. So this retrieves your GitHub token and org name from the vault. So let's see if we can get it to work. Okay, now I see that the GitHub token and GitHub org were loaded from the vault. So this is actually the right way to do it. If you have something that is set in your terminal, in your shell, obviously it'll work. But every time and as long as you're trying to use Bitwarden, try and make sure that you try and load it this way so that you know that your actual process of locking, unlocking, and you're using the credentials stored in Bitwarden can be loaded. Okay. Now, we'll also talk about a little bit of what we are actually going to be doing in this chapter. So the first thing we will look at in chapter 7 is this script called onboarding API. Where is that? Onboarding API. I'll talk a little bit about what we do in the script. So this is essentially a Flask REST API that is the front door for all the self-service operations. So when a team calls post/teams, or it automatically creates a Kubernetes namespace, sets up the RBAC role bindings, whether it is a team lead or a developer or just a viewer, and applies those resource quotas. So once the API called, so you can think that this just one API call around this sort of replaces 5 manual kubectl calls. So, and that's the whole idea of having the script. The next one we'll look at is this called permission delegation .py. What this does is that it lets the team leads grant sort of fine-grained permissions to their members. This is a requirement in any organization. And we need to do that without involving the platform team. So this sort of implements a 3-tier RBAC model, a lead, developer, viewer, like we spoke about earlier. So that's the script. Then there is a project bootstrapper. So what Project Bootstrapper does is it scaffolds a complete production-ready project from a single command. So you'll have a Docker file, Helm chart, CI/CD, whatever, and then it sort of supports Python, Go, Node.js. I'm using Python mostly, but you can use other languages too if you want to. Next one is what I call as this audit logger _py. So what this does is this actually, think of it like every self-service action, whether it's team creation, member addition, permission grant, and all that is logged into who, what, when, right? If you can't do that, then you can't track how this is being used and where the problems are. So this is also essential for compliance, debugging, and any kind of platform usage understanding. So that is what this one is. Okay, so now that we have that working, let's go ahead and run these things and see how this works. So I'll quit these ones, come back here, and the first thing I'll do is run the onboarding API. So this basically starts the onboarding API, as you can see. So now this is running on port 5000, right? So that is good. So the next step, once you do that, is to create a team. So to create a team, what we are actually going to do is that we'll use the post command to create a team. So we will open a different terminal and make sure that we are in the right folder. All right, so now we are going to run a curl command, with the slash teams an option, the endpoint for this, the what we created here, which is our onboarding API, and then we will actually provide some information like what's the name of the team, what is the display name, and then what's the lead name, and I'm saying since Alice at example.com, and you provide the CPU memory parts and all that. So that is how we would actually do that. So let's try and run this to create a team. You can see that the team has been created. Now, what we need to do is to see that, the API created everything in the cluster, like, namespace, quotas, RBAC, and all that. So let's make sure that that's the case. You can see that, yes, everything has been created here. Quota, team, roles, everything is in there. Okay, now that the team is there, the next thing from our example is to think about creating a member or adding a member. So we'll use another curl command for that. So you can see the endpoint changing here, and then we will actually add this a member Bob into Alice's team. So we will go ahead and add that here. So that has been added. Now that is there, the next thing we looked at, remember that permission delegation activity. So what we want to do is to grant the role, developer role to Bob. So we added Bob. Now we need to know what, we know that Bob is a developer. Let's add Bob there. So now we granted the developer role to Bob. Now, you also want the Bob, since he's a developer, one of the things that Bob should be doing is to be able to create projects. So we can actually go ahead and do that. And now Bob has create projects. So Bob can actually do the project creation activity as a developer. The next thing is that, so as you're trying to bootstrap a project, the whole idea is that you need to create a complete repo with your Docker file, Helm chart, CI/CD pipeline, catalog info, and all that. Right? So think of it like that starter kit activity, if you're familiar with that term. So as you're trying to restart, bootstrap a project, what you would want to do is to go and run Project Bootstrapper, which is something I showed you earlier. You might want to take a look at that, saying that, okay, I'm creating this RESTful API service. So I actually go ahead and created this with RESTful API that actually created 11 files. Okay, so the Project Bootstrapper created certain files. Let's look at where these files are. So what it did was it actually created a folder called My API. And you can see within My API, there are multiple files. So if you do LTR API, you can see all the files in here. So you can see, the requirements text, my API. And so you have like these files here as well as these ones. So you can see that sort of instantiated that starter kit. Okay, so now every self-service action is to be logged, as I mentioned, for not just for governance and compliance, but also to ensure that you actually improve their overall developer experience. So what we will do is that we'll run the audit logger to see what has been logged. So essentially, you can see that we created the team with Alice as the lead. Then we actually created a member there, Bob, and then Bob was given a particular role. Then we bootstrapped a project. So you can see that everything that we attempted to do are being logged. So now that is there, we can run some tests to see if the test onboarding sort of worked. So you can look at that and see how each of these things worked. And it ran these 8 tests, and you can find this is how it all worked.